All right, we are live. That took longer than I thought. Emilia, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
No, it's a pleasure. It's great to have you here. Could you give us a quick intro to who you are and what it is that you do now?
Sure. So I am a nutrition consultant and educator, predominantly in the fitness space. My background is very academic. So I have a undergrad, master's, and PhD in either nutrition or exercise physiology. And I used to lecture in sport nutrition. So that was my kind of main job for quite a long time. And then at the same time as that, as lecturing, I became a bodybuilder. And so I competed in bikini for 3 to 4 years and quit in 2017 when I came second in Britain. I was 31, 32, I think, and I was getting beaten. I got beaten by a 21-year-old, and I was like, I'm done. This is my natural potential here, and I'm never going to beat a 21-year-old. And not that she was assisted. She was assisted. I moving on to this week, I'm done. So I learned a lot when I went into the fitness industry competing. There was no evidence-based stuff out there, and it was very a lot of the issues around fitness nutrition was glazed over, and so I kind of fell into the role of uncovering all of that and just trying to be really, really honest with the darker side of extreme dieting, and as a result of that, I fell into the work that I do now, which is predominantly working with people who are trying to improve their relationships with food, often who have been chronically dieting for a long time and are just trying to find that kind of quote unquote balance that was kind of like unspoken for so long. And I also run EIQ Nutrition with Emma Story-Gordon, which is an online nutrition course for predominantly personal trainers. That is a compassionate, holistic approach to nutrition. So we incorporate a lot of the stuff around mindfulness and compassion within basic nutrition fundamentals. So that's what I do now.
Awesome. Yeah, and like what a journey that is to compete in, bikini shows to then sort of where you are now. And obviously it makes, I guess everyone gets to a point where they see like younger versions of themselves and then think, like, do I still have this? Do I still have what it takes or not? And you kind of reevaluate your life. Mm-hmm. But what was that journey for you? Because I mean, going from competing in bikini to like where you are now is obviously like yards and yards apart. And there must have been a big loss of like identity, I guess, when you decided to step down from that kind of role.
Yeah. Do you know what? I'm quite lucky that I suppose I didn't really identify too much with myself as a competitor because I was so heavily involved in teaching at the time and my job was so important at the time and I was writing a new undergraduate course. I didn't have the space to say, I am a competitor above everything else and this is my identity and this is what I live for. I just didn't have the capacity to do that. So I suppose I was quite lucky in that I didn't put everything into that. That being said, my relationship was in the fitness world at the time and he was a bodybuilder. So there was still a huge part of my life that was in that. And I think as well, I was quite lucky that I was always honest from the start. So my very first prep I did with a coach and then after that, I did it myself. And I was very honest from the very beginning that I suffered with binge eating after competing and these are the struggles that I'm going through. And I think that the problems often arise when people are too ashamed, that they feel ashamed to talk about the other side of things and to say that things are not going perfectly. I think those are the people that struggle more so. I found it quite easy to step away from. I kind of did a life overhaul at that point. I quit my full-time job. I went to California for 3 months. I was in a very privileged position where I could do that. Started meditating a lot. I finished with my boyfriend. So I had this huge kind of life change. So it's actually quite easy for me to step away because it was like almost like I'm just rebirthing myself into this new role. But I know that I see it a lot with competitors who I work with. It's just really, really hard. They always like to cling on to, well, I'll start my relationship with food. I'll get my period back and then I'll compete again. And they like to cling on to that because like you said, they have that as their identity and they don't know what happens when they let that go.
Yeah. And as you said, it was good that you maintained other arenas in your life that you could hang your identity hat on. Like obviously a bikini was just something that you did alongside everything else. It wasn't the only thing that you felt akin to or known for. But as you said there, you had these issues of like binge eating and that recovery in between shows. And you work with then a lot of people who are like, oh yeah, I'll recover a relationship with food and then I'll just do it again. Mm-hmm. And so for you, what did that journey look like of getting free from bodybuilding bikini type style diets to starting to repair that relationship with food? Obviously, you went to California for 3 months, so was that the start of that process for you?
Yeah, I mean, I was dead lucky. I started getting into meditation like the year before. So when I first competed and discovered that actually when you get that lean, your relationship with food 95% of the time gets absolutely destroyed, at least temporarily. I refuse to really believe that anyone does it in a healthy way. Well, you can. But again, nobody spoke about that, right? Like,
No.
if anyone says it, they're probably in denial.
Yeah. I was.
Well, exactly, right? You're like, yeah, we've all been there. And so,
Flexible.
yeah, flexible is not like overeating a night and then doing cardio in the morning and then just overeating again and tracking it, so it's fine.
Yeah.
Who knew? So for me, like, I immediately went into first prep, found this happened, immediately delved into the research behind mindful eating. I didn't know what mindful eating was at the time. I didn't really know what mindfulness was at the time. But I was like, there must be some sort of help for people that overeat when they diet. I didn't even know. I had a PhD in physiology. I was teaching sport nutrition, but I didn't know that this was a side effect of dieting, because in fitness, we just didn't know that this happened.
Mm-hmm.
So I looked into mindful eating and I did things like, right, I'm going to start meditation. And I did surface level meditation. I would go out for a walk and stick a track on and kind of just try and start something. I started eating with chopsticks, and I thought all of these things, I started writing blogs about it because I thought I'm just learning as I go. So I'll just kind of share what I can. And for me, I'd started doing all of this stuff, but it wasn't until I quit competing, went to California, and I started meditating every single day, practicing gratitude every single day, reading a lot of Brene Brown and a lot of work around shame and compassion and Kristen Neff's work. And I went to UCLA, have a Center for Mindfulness Awareness Research. And so I went to UCLA a couple of times and did some courses on compassion. And I realized just how much that made me feel whole and content, and how opposite that was to binge eating, to competing and extreme dieting. And I'd had disordered eating habits for my whole life. Like a lot of people who go into competing, and you'll know this, it's just another way of masking your disordered eating habits, right? And putting a shiny trophy on top of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the first time in my life that I recognized why I did what I did, became very, very self-aware, and realized that I'd been binge eating since I was 15. And I didn't know why I had been doing that. And I started to recognize that the links between emotional regulation and suppression. And nobody had told me until this point. I was 32. Nobody had told me at this point, you're probably overeating and you're probably binge eating, you're probably dieting because actually there's something, you're struggling with your emotional regulation. It's probably nothing to do with your nutrition. And we know, right? We know people who study nutrition and at uni or elsewhere have an increased risk of things like disordered eating and an increased prevalence of that, because we think that learning about food is the answer to our disordered eating habits. We want to fix ourselves. And it's like, we'd all be better off probably going to uni and studying psychology or psychotherapy or something like that. But we don't recognize that it's not often a food problem. It's often an emotional problem. And so for me, that was a big switch over in that 3-month period. And then I basically came back and changed the whole way I ran my business, the whole way I treated myself, became much more intuitive and looked into a lot more of that research, and everything kind of changed from that point.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for the detailed answer. It's brilliant, and it's funny how you mentioned that about most people who work in our field have some disordered eating tendencies. And that was a big hit for me when I was reading a lot about this last year, of it makes so much sense because we help people with food and fitness, and we're so obsessed with food and fitness, but actually they're as you said, flexible dieting. And if it fits your macros and tracking calories is that's our way of applying a rules-based structure, but making it seem okay and being yeah, this is the key. Oh, you can't handle chocolates because you're not fitting it into your calories. Yeah. And we're no, actually I say it all the time, our problems with food have nothing to do with food. So much deeper than that. And I think what frustrates me, and I'm sure it will frustrate you as well, is being within an industry where there's almost an attack between sides of there's this compassionate, mindful, intuitive side, and then there's the side that's still clinging to this no, you've got to, the only way to educate yourself about food is through tracking, and you can only intuitively eat because you've done that. And it's no, they are different.
That's such the classic one, isn't it? You can only intuitively eat and maintain your body composition because you understand food. And I'm to be fair, there is some of that, but it's I bet you're still counting in your head. It's no, genuinely, I'm not, genuinely. No. And I think a lot of it's fear-based. I think a lot of it, there's a couple of things. I think a lot of coaches are scared to admit that they've got a problem with food themselves.
Yeah.
So people who are fitness coaches who maybe don't diet and stuff, and so on the outside they seem healthy, but they still can't cook with olive oil, for example. Very simple. You know what I mean?
Fry. They've got shares in Fry Light.
Yes, absolutely that, right? They will still do things like that. They still won't have, like, there's healthful choices you can make, salad dressing on the side, etc. But I know that there are certain coaches that can't manage to do like the basic kind of, they can't go out to eat. And I think that those types of coaches have a big fear around themselves being exposed. And so they cling to that narrative of anti-diet is completely wrong and this is the way you have to do it. But then I think the other side of that is there's also fear on a collective level of the fitness industry that what do we do if we don't give someone macros? And I think that's scary. How do we diet someone? Because especially, like, you're the same as me, I think. Like, we're not against dieting by any means, especially if it benefits your health. We're not, like, I'm not anti-diet, but I'm anti-diet for the wrong reasons. I struggle with fat loss when it's not supportive of your health. I'm not against it, but again, I'm not against it by any means, but you really have to look at why are you doing it. And again, with coaches in the fitness industry, I just think there's this fear of like, what if people realize that dieting is not serving them? What do we do then? And so that's why I think they really dig their heels in. And of course, for a lot of people, there's also a massive misunderstanding about what it is, what intuitive eating is and all that stuff.
Yeah, like the amount of, I mean, no one ever in their world of life like changed their opinion from someone arguing with them on social media. Like, it's never happened. And so now I just never do it because it's so pointless. But like the amount of posts I've seen where it's like, oh yeah, you know, intuitively I want these 5 brownies. And this is the problem with intuitive eating. And it's like, intuitively no one on the face of the earth has ever wanted 5 brownies. Like, there is that misunderstanding, as you said. And I can understand that fear because, as you said, you went through this big journey of reading about mindful eating, reading about intuitive eating, and going through that journey of like understanding emotional regulation and like a deeper work, basically, of like, where are these disordered eating tendencies coming from? And then you revamped your entire coaching model and business around that, which, when you've already got an established coaching practice and a name and a figure and an audience for a certain thing, that's like, you know, I did the same thing. It's business suicide. You do go through like a few months of like, ooh, like I'm struggling here. Like, I'm hoping that this is going to pay off. And so I think you're right. It's fear-based. It's from coaches who don't know, all right, yeah, the only way you can educate your food on nutrition is through giving them macros. It's not. There are other ways. You just need to discover what they are.
Yeah, absolutely. That it's funny that you say that, because I did the same. And I think there was a year of Instagram where my followers stayed exactly the same for a full year.
I'm in that now.
Are you? It's like, why? What am I doing wrong?
yeah, literally. Like, monthly follows and unfollows are completely level. And
absolutely. Happened to me for a full 12 months at least, because you're you're losing the people that liked you before. And you're getting people that are liking your message now, but then at the same time, Instagram also doesn't like nuance. So there was also time when that thing happened to me, because I would say dieting's okay, but then I'd also say dieting can be bad. So now you'll rarely see me posting about dieting anymore, even though I think it's fine. It does, like, social marketing and stuff doesn't make space for that. So you will always you need to find a story and stick to it, even if your practice doesn't necessarily totally align with that, which is again difficult to do.
It's frustrating. Yeah. Like, we could obviously talk about marketing and things all day long, like on another episode. And because I've noticed that same thing. Like, people will read maybe like one part of my caption or something and say like, oh, so are you against that? And I'm like, no. Did you read the post? No. I'm like, for God's sake. Like, this platform's pointless. But yeah, it's fear-based, because, as you said, they don't know otherwise how to. And I get the whole, oh, you can only eat intuitively because you understand food. Yeah, that's fine. But it's also, let's take our clients deeper and let's help them understand that there are ways that we can uncover disordered eating. And as you said, we can diet intentionally if we'd like to, but it's just choosing a method that's going to be right for that person and honors their relationship with food, which can sometimes be hard to do.
Yeah, and I think the key thing here with that message of you can only diet, you can only intuitively eat if you understand food, is that there's research that shows if we put people who are overweight or obese into an intuitive eating intervention, so structured, they don't gain weight. And that's without nutritional, like that's without macro tracking and stuff beforehand. They don't gain weight when they are actually eating intuitively. And again, we know that intuitive eating scores are negatively associated with BMI, i.e. lower BMIs tend to be associated with the higher intuitive eating scores. So it's purely an opinion based on the lived experience of fitness people who 90% of the time have had disordered eating habits in the past, and that's why they're in fitness in the first place. Yep. That's all that is. It's just their opinion. But because there's so many people that shout that, and collectively come together in the fitness space and have that louder voice, because there are just so many of them at this point, it's like, it's peddled. It's like, but look at the research, and often it's evidence-based people. So it's people that come through evidence-based stuff, talk about flexible dieting, talk about like all of the evidence. They've got all the evidence behind that stuff. But then when you say, well, actually, the evidence says that for a lot of people, intuitive eating is actually a more successful way of managing their health and their body composition, it's like, oh, no, because I can't do it. So it's like, well, then you've got a problem. Yeah, you've got a problem with your relationship with food, not everyone else. So, but again, it's the fear-based acceptance of, well, maybe you're right. Maybe I should be able to keep biscuits in the house, and I can't. And that's a disordered eating habit.
Well, exactly. And I mean, how useless actually is the message, don't have junk food or trigger food in the house? Like, it's pointless.
Yeah.
In the world of Deliveroo. Like, it literally doesn't stop anyone. I can get someone to go and buy custard creams from the co-op and throw it through my window. Like, I don't, having them not in the house is not going to help me. And you're true. Like, there's good research around this now, and it's only improving. And if you can't call yourself an evidence-based coach if you can't accept both sides of the coin, and that's an issue.
I think for me a big problem was the original research that was the anti-diet research. So 95% of diets fail. That research, woeful, from the 50s, one study, not representative of diets, and it's one that anti-diet culture cling to. And there are a couple of other pieces of research that anti-diet culture cling to that is just not helpful. And if you're truly evidence-based, you'd say that research is crap. And I think, and a lot of the original diet research too didn't exclude for people with disordered eating. So of course diets failed for people with disordered eating because that's not the way you want to go. And if you took them out, diets probably would be far more successful. And so I think if you are evidence-based and you look at that, you say, well, anti-diet stuff is crap, because actually their evidence-based behind that is crap. Mm-hmm. But now we have a lot of research with actual post that. So people who actually do use intuitive eating interventions and do use things like positive psychology and all these things, that research is now there to suggest that it is helpful. So you can't, like, yes, the 95% of diets fail is crap. It's crap. But get up to date with the research. Look at the stuff over the last 5-10 years. And we know that actually since the 1995 is when intuitive eating first came out. The research that's come out since then, a lot of it is really robust. And that's what people are not getting on board with. They're clinging to like the pre-intervention stuff. And it's like, that's not good enough anymore. I agree, it's crap. But actually, that's irrelevant because this is stuff that matters.
I know, it's so funny, isn't it? Because like, if we were to look at the blue zones for a moment, and which everyone like talks about how like, oh, there's no good versus bad foods. Let's look at the blue zones and how their lifestyle is so different to ours, and that's why they live longer than we do. But there's no specific dietary food patterns. It's like, so then why are we still sticking to try and create like rules and routines around food, even if they are flexible rules and routines? It's like the Western society, the only society that really, really struggle with such large problems with health and obesity, and it's because we're there's like a disordered eating paradigm that like the whole of Western civilization seems stuck in. Like,
why do you think that is? What's your hypothesis?
It's hard, right? Because I appear on BBC Radio Leeds like on a monthly basis as their like fitness expert, which is cool because I can go deeper into these kind of things. But I feel like it literally goes over most people's heads because they still like listen to me and then go, yeah, but then what's okay to eat? And it's like, I did a seminar at a gym the other week when I said, instinctively, we all know like what healthy food is. And someone literally put their hand up and be like, I actually don't think I do anymore, because there's so much misinformation out there. And you go to a library and you go to the nutrition section and you've got like the homeostatic diet next to the metabolic diet, next to the paleo diet, next to the carnivore diet, next to the vegan diet, next to the keto carnivore diet, next to the vegan drink pumpkin soup diet. And it's like, yeah, I might coin that. No, I won't. But I feel like it's just because we are so obviously, I think we're so obsessed with health and technology and almost like trying to get like quick hacks for things. I don't know. I just think it's become an utter mess. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I completely agree. I think as well, I think in Western society, we are so conditioned to have control, be more, achieve more, consistently try and push for more and more and more. And with that comes an inherent need or inherent feeling of not feeling worthy as we are. And I suppose it's quite deep, but not feeling good enough as we are. So we're constantly striving for more and more. And when we don't feel good enough, often we will try and control as much as we can in order to feel this kind of get to this point where we feel good enough, we feel quote unquote perfect, right? The more we can control, the more perfect things seem, the more we can feel like we're enough. And I think that's actually where a lot of it comes from, because as a way of control, we control however we want to word it. We're controlling our food with flexible dieting or tracking or whatever it is, having these food rules. It gives us a sense of control. It gives us a sense of better than, more than, achieving towards something, perfection, feeling more than enough. And I think that's where a lot of it is driven from. And it's like, what happens when you feel worthy as you are and you strive for more from a place of just desire as opposed to need? Your whole outlook changes. It doesn't need to be consistently improved upon. It just is something that is there to support you living your best life. And it's so easy to condense that there into 2 sentences, right? That's a lifetime of work. That's a lifetime of getting more self-aware and figuring out why you feel the need to control these things. But I think that in our society as a whole, we've definitely got that, because it's not so much the same in certain European countries, which are obviously westernized, but like Mediterranean style diets, and where they have much less of this inherent drive to consistently achieve. They take their time with meals. They're much more fluid in their approach to nutrition, and generally it's a much more healthier approach to nutrition.
Yeah, it's not just because their diet is full of like seafood and fresh veg and the rest of it, which obviously contributes, and everyone's obsessed with that. Like, oh, what makes these people so healthy? It must be what they eat. But their approach to life is much more relaxed and mindful and ease. And you're right about that kind of like sense of achievement and sense of rushing as well. I never really thought about it that way. And it's interesting because you were talking about, your 3 months of like studying mindfulness and approach and things. And I say to people all the time, like, using the Headspace app daily, like, has definitely saved my life when it comes to like more sense of mindfulness around life, but also just more sense of like natural happiness and how that's translated to other aspects.
Yeah.
And the people who talk to me and say like, oh, meditation's a waste of time. And I'm like, well, what do you do first thing in the morning? Oh, I stick the news on. I'm like, that's probably 10 times or more worse.
That's my night. Absolutely that. I think, like, I say this quite a lot. Sometimes I feel like a fraud because I think I get most of my clients to meditate in some way. So for a lot of people, a blanket statement of everyone should meditate, not really helpful, because some people, with trauma-based backgrounds, meditation can be really difficult. But finding some form of mindfulness for everyone is so important. And sometimes I feel like a fraud because I think most of my clients, I get them to meditate at some point. I wonder if they'd get the same results if they just meditated without any of the other stuff that I do. And I sometimes think that, and I think meditation is that transformative for some people. Like you said, it saved your life. I think it completely overhauled my whole relationship with food.
Yeah.
It's one of the best things that everyone can do, to find some way of meditation, whether it be a Headspace app or just mindful breathing in the morning for 2 minutes. And I think there's this huge, people who are really busy say, well, I just can't do it because my mind just wanders too much. And I always find that quite insulting, because I think, do you think that I'm not busy? Do you think my mind is not busy?
Yeah.
Yourself, like, we all have that. And one of my clients said, she said, the way that transformed my relationship with meditation was saying, every time my mind wanders and I come back to the present moment, it's like doing 1 rep from my brain, like my muscles. And she said, so I'm just doing a workout when I meditate. She said, as soon as I framed it like that, it transformed my whole relationship with meditation, and she meditates all the time now. So I think I'm with you. It's one of the most transformative things, actually, that you can do.
Well, 100%. And funny, because you were totally right about that, like, sense of control. That's where all like disordered eating practices come from. It's the sense of like need to control. And it's why, as a Western society, particularly UK, America, because as you mentioned, there are European countries that don't struggle with this as much as we do. It's almost like that sense of control is then what leads to that perfectionist attitude, because everyone's looking for like the right way to do something or the perfect way to do something. And then that attitude literally trips us up with food and drink, because we'll then have these like perfect plans or perfect approaches we're trying to follow, and inevitably life happens and gets in the way. And then it's like, oh, well, you know, what's the point? Like, I might as well. I'm traveling for work, so there's absolutely no way I can eat healthily. So I might as well get like a double mac and cheese from McDonald's and supersize it, because, you know, YOLO and all that.
Yeah, absolutely that. And I'm sure you've been there. I've definitely been there. It's absolutely the classic screw it mentality. Like I remember when I was competing and I put out that classic binge cycle of like Monday, Tuesday low calories, Wednesday high, Thursday, Friday low, and Saturday, Sunday high. And I remember putting it out and people were like, oh my God, it's like no one's ever put this into words before. And it wasn't because I was the first person to do it, but I remember it in fitness. People just didn't recognize it was like that is a legit thing for so many of us, this consistent cycle. But the I mean, the all or nothing, we know that the all or nothing mindset is the worst, and the best thing you can do for your nutrition is being consistently imperfect. And I suppose that's one of the ways I balance diet with my clients. Like if I do have a client who's come to me for fat loss, they might have macros. They probably will have macros a lot of the time, but alongside their macros, it will also have the classic, this is your macros. You have unconditional permission to eat over these macros whenever you choose to do so. That's the caveat of those macros. And then they don't do it because they might do it over 100 calories and then they carry on with their day. That switch of just saying to yourself, I have a choice to eat over. This is not a food rule. It completely takes away that all or nothing mentality. But if you look at kind of a therapeutic approach, like a CBT type approach to this, all of that does stem from the core belief. Like we all have core beliefs that have come from childhood, etc., and we've internalized these as we've gotten older. And for most people with disordered eating, they have this core belief, however they want to word it, that they're not enough. And not enough then stems into perfectionism, which stems into black and white thinking with food. And then all it does when you then go off on your food and you go way off because you've got this black and white thinking is it reinforces the fact that you're
Oh, I lost you. I lost you for good this time.
Yeah.
Oh, you're back.
Oh, am I back?
You're back. You froze on me. Yeah.
It's all right. I don't know what happened
there. It's all right. You just froze a little bit on me, but I feel like you're back.
Yeah. Sorry.
Hey, don't worry.
Wi-Fi does say it's strong.
Yeah, weird. It might just be the length of the connection.
Oh, I didn't even know that was a thing.
No, I don't know. I'm just making things up. Technology's not my strong point.
It sounded properly legit. If you hadn't said that, I'd be like, yeah, it's definitely that.
Sorry, you were in we don't feel enough. And then that comes into the sense of perfectionism.
Yeah, and it just becomes this reinforcing cycle because whenever we feel like we fail in our diet, it reinforces the idea that we're not enough. We strive harder to be perfect. Then we strive harder with the black or white thinking. We're more likely to fail. And it just becomes this perpetual cycle. And until you start to think, I'm enough, a core belief is very hard to change. You need to think about each part of this cycle of where you can change it. Either I'm not enough, my perfectionist tendencies, my black and white thinking around food. These are all areas that we can work on to stop that cycle of being all in or all out. And of course, the not enough stuff is things like meditation and doing some inner work, therapy, etc. But on a surface level, this is where we can manage nutrition and not have black and white foods and practice food neutrality and unconditional permission to eat. That's where we do have the kind of surface level control, which is what we're doing with nutrition. It's the surface level stuff, whilst we continue to work on the underlying stuff.
Yeah, for sure. What about for your, because you mentioned, and we talked about it a little bit before about intentional fat loss when it's good for health, that's fine. But it's, beyond like when it's not going to be good for your health, or there's actually like no real need for you to lose fat. Like I used to work with a lot of people who do CrossFit, for example, and that was my background. And I'm very self-aware now that in the back, former years of my life, particularly mid-20s, very, very body dysmorphic in terms of, need to be leaner, need to be thinner. I'm fat, I'm chubby, whatever. Because you're in this environment of like very, very, very well-built people, as I'm sure is the same in your community of people who step on stage in their underwear. So what do you do if you get someone who's literally like, okay, I want to lose fat, but you know deep down that there's something deeper than that, because you ask them why and they're like, I don't know, I just need to be leaner, and there's no real gravity to their goal. They're already normal body fat, if not actually out on the athletic side, and you're aware of the detriments of severe dieting, that kind of thing. That must be, it's a hard, I know, because I get it with quite a bit. It's a hard conversation to be like, I don't actually think fat loss is what you're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have to have that conversation, because I think I never stop someone from dropping body fat unless they've got disordered eating habits, in which case I'm quite firm with that. But if it's just they're dieting, but they don't really know why, they just want to get a bit leaner, I would never really stop that initially, if they've got a decent relationship with food. But at the same time as doing that, I would say, right, we're going to work on what are your core values right now, and we'll work through your values list, and we'll put some goals in line with your values aside from dieting. So if you have a value of like career progression or something, let's start putting some goals in place for your career. And it's not for me to direct people in other parts of their life, but it's for me to say, how can we support your overall health in a holistic, flourishing way by looking at all of these other domains in your life? And often what I find with people when they start to do that, for example, one of my clients right now is she's got to spend 10 minutes a night on Tinder. Like, that's her goal. And often when people start doing that, it translates into them recognizing actually that they've got so much more in their life that they want to do, that dieting is hindering. And so sometimes often they'll say, well, actually, I want to lose fat, but what I want to do more is be able to go out on these dates and do these things. That's what's making me feel whole. And then so the diet focus starts to diminish. So sometimes that's a way of tackling it. Other times, if they're very body focused and their body image is low and they think that dieting is going to improve their body image, which we know doesn't happen, I'll do a lot of body image work with them. And so they start to become more neutral towards their body, more appreciative of what their body allows. And over time, when you're doing a lot of body image work intentionally, you find that body appreciation improves, body gratitude improves. And you get to a point where you say, dieting is actually not, it's hurting my body. It might not be hurting it, if you drop a few kilos, that's fine. But if you are lean, on the leaner side and you're dieting, you are by definition in a state of malnutrition, right? And the longer you're in that deficit state, the longer you are in a malnutrition state.
Malnourished.
Well done. I was like, what is the word I'm trying to think of?
I always get there midpoint. I'm like, fuck, what's that term?
That happens to me all the time. And so they go, actually, I want to treat my body better than this. And when they get to that point, again, they think dieting's maybe not the right thing. And so again, it's not about if you're in a larger body and it's beneficial for your health, great. Like that's slightly as an aside. But if you're dieting because you think you should, or because you've got a holiday, or because patriarchy, or whatever it is, challenging those things and really trying to find a place of body appreciation as opposed to fake body positivity. Look at my cellulite, I love everything that I see in the mirror. I'm not talking about that shit. I'm talking about legit, my body has allowed me this morning to go and hang out with my best mate. That type of stuff. You start to drop the emphasis on dieting and start to think about, how can I give my body the gift of nourishment?
Yes. Yeah. That's a great point. I really enjoyed that. Particularly about it's evaluating what that client really needs. And as you said, if they want to drop body fat and they've got a good relationship with food and they just want to be a little bit leaner, like I've done that with people as well. And you kind of ask the right questions and screen them and think, yeah, okay, like, yeah, you're good to go. And otherwise, as you mentioned, it's working on certain beliefs, thought patterns, processes, disordered eating. And as the values list was a great one, let's look at other areas of your life. People often fill the void with food. That's where disordered eating comes from. Where it's like, what else is going on? Is, as you said, career, relationships, that kind of thing, like social health and all these other aspects of health, deep health that people, Gen Pop clients are going to overlook them because they're not aware of them. They're just fed diet culture over and over again through pretty much every channel of media that they look at. So they're obviously going to come to us with that in mind. They don't come to a nutrition consultant or trainer and think, okay, yeah, let's work on my social health. Exactly. Like, I want abs.
Yeah, exactly. But it's like, the irony being, of course, that your social health improvement is probably going to do more for your sex life than having abs. Well, probably. Exactly.
Well, probably, yeah, most definitely, isn't it? And that's the thing. It's funny when you start working on these deeper things that a lot of these issues go away. And that's always my comeback to a lot of people that talk to me about like intuitive eating and mindful eating and fat loss and things like that. And I say, well, if I help my client regulate their emotions, and deal with them in a much better way so that they're no longer sabotaging their progress with food, their main meals were never really the problem. So do you not think they're going to lose fat when they stop binge eating every night?
Yeah, exactly
Most
that.
probably.
Exactly that. And I just talked recently for Sohi Lee and her coaches.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, it was great. We were talking about intuitive eating for physique goals.
Okay.
It's a place where you can intuitively eat and have physique goals. And
Yeah.
in some way, and I don't mean extreme, I just mean in general. And if you look at the research around eating more intuitively, people are more likely to drop body fat if you're in a larger body. And it's not because you are just in an obesogenic environment and you don't exercise. If you're in a larger body because you emotionally eat, you overeat, you have disordered eating habits.
Mm-hmm.
If you work on body food choice congruence, i.e. how food makes you feel in your body, if you work on that and you work on eating for physical rather than emotional reasons, which are two of the key constructs of intuitive eating, you are more likely probably to drop body fat from doing that without tracking than you are tracking. Because if your issue is emotionally eating and overeating things for those reasons, and you track, fine, you'll drop 5 kilos in a couple of months. I guarantee you've gained it again in a couple more months.
Oh yeah.
And it's like, why can we not, like, the problem is that anti-diet culture will not let us use intuitive eating for fat loss. You're not allowed. It's a weight neutral approach. So it's about saying, it's about people like us trying to get that message across to people like within the fitness industry without blasphemizing the anti-diet stuff, without pissing off the fitness industry. And it's a hard one to do.
Oh yeah.
And I think, if we think about people who are in larger bodies who would benefit losing body fat for their health, I would say at least half of them, probably way more than that, to be honest, are in larger bodies because of the emotional eating side, because of the overeating side.
100%.
Not because people in larger bodies are not lazy.
No.
And that narrative of like, well, people just need to exercise more and track their food. It's like, it's not laziness that this is not the problem.
No.
So tackling laziness by having more control. Yes, having some food guidelines in place is probably really helpful. Yeah, regular monitoring for a lot of people is probably going to be useful. And for some people, tracking is going to be really useful.
Yeah.
It's not about saying that's not useful, but it's also about saying, I have a lot of clients who come to me for fat loss who are in larger bodies, and we spend 3 months doing the more intuitive stuff, and they lose maybe 5 kilos over 3 months. Yeah. And then we go, right, okay, we're in a great place now, let's start tracking.
Yeah.
To me, that's an ideal scenario where they're supporting their health in myriad ways. And then it's like, right, let's get some food education in here, and then let's push fat loss a little bit more because now you're in the place to do it. But
it's a difficult one, that middle ground of trying to not piss off any camp, and as you mentioned, not use anti-diet terms for a dieting approach, and not throw too many rocks at the fitness industry. Although I do enjoy throwing a good old rock at the fitness industry, particularly the whole like, oh, you got to want it more, bro approach, or we all have the same 24 hours in the day, and it's like, let's remember what stage of the life cycle we're in, guys, compared to our clients. And 100%, right, let's help people regulate their emotions, deal with everything else that's going on, and understand that there are different tools in the toolbox. And as you mentioned, people who are in large bodies they're not lazy, and they're not silly, they're not stupid people. Oftentimes they're very educated, they're very good at what they do, particularly people who are hiring us. Like, they're clearly in good jobs and have achieved a lot of great things within their lives, that actually, if we affirm them and help them realize their superpowers and their skill sets that they have within those roles and how they can apply that to fitness and nutrition, and actually do a better job of applying fitness and nutrition to their priorities in life, rather than just trying to get them to live like we do, because that's never going to work. Yeah. We're gonna be on a much better place.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, Emilia, because we didn't necessarily gloss over it, but obviously you talked a lot about your 3-month stint and then the deep work that you did and kind of coming back to it. But what was then the stage for you of like, okay, I'm used to following sort of diet plans or my own macros or things for bikini, and I want to embrace this more intuitive side. Did you do the whole like, okay, I'm going to gradually like wean off of this, or did you go like cold turkey, rehab, drug addict state, like straitjacket, no tracking?
I mean, it felt like a straitjacket. So I finished competing, and as soon as I stopped competing, I had finals. Then in the next day, I stopped tracking and never tracked. I came cold turkey. And in my experience, actually now with working with people, is that if you're somebody who regularly overeats, you don't need to wean off tracking, you need to take it away.
Yeah.
If you're somebody who finds control in tracking, then weaning off is probably a good idea because it's just easier to manage. But if you're somebody who, like what I would have been post-show, which would be more likely to overeat, removing it immediately was the right thing for me to do. And at the same time, removed scale weight, removed any sort of metrics at all. That was the right thing for me to do. But I did fall into the classic mistake, and I totally got this wrong. I blasphemized the intuitive eating message probably for a while because I removed tracking, but then I did an intuitive diet where I just basically didn't track and dieted and got really lean to the point where I was about 2 kilograms from stage weight, and then went to California for 3 months. So because I wanted to prove that I could do it without tracking, but it was still, I still had that big physique focus at the end of the day. I was still dieting for a holiday. And that was probably an error because then I went to California, 2 kilograms extra off stage weight. I didn't weigh myself and I was so food focused. And then I was in California where it was just like everything was ginormous and it was food accessibility was huge and my food environment completely changed and I overate. And I restricted and overate in my own way. And that was after a year of not tracking. So it wasn't like I hadn't healed my relationship with food as much as I was more intuitive. I still wasn't. I still had this external focus. And like I said, I basically had a week where I just realized that food for me had always been, I went through a bit of a mini breakup when I was there and I realized what food was doing. And I thought, God, I'm eating all of this food because I'm sad. And no one had ever just explained that to me before. And then I realized I started binge eating when I was 15 when my things went on with my parents. And this is something that's so common. I was the positive member of my family that tried to help hold everyone together. And so I never showed my emotions. I just ate. And only when I was 31 in California did I go, oh, this is it. This is what I've been doing. And I spent a week crying. I hadn't cried in about 2 years. And I cried for about a week. And then after that, genuinely, it was almost like a light switch. It was immediately after that, I stopped looking at my body. I stopped taking so many selfies. I kind of just really cut that down, became what was genuinely intuitive with my food. And it never, ever changed from that point onwards. And that was 2018. So it's 3 years ago. So I did pull it away, but I'm still lying to myself. I still had the physique focus, even though I was quote intuitively eating. And I'd also like to say, like, I've never done a specific intuitive eating protocol. Like, I've never gone through that practitioner training, or because I don't rate it personally, that structured intervention that they use in research and books. That's not for me. I don't agree with a lot of it. So I would never do that really structured intervention. When I talk about it, I'm talking much more of an intuitive eating, an eating intuitively type of style of eating, i.e. etc.
Yeah, like more mindfulness approach.
Yeah.
Than the intuitive eating TM approach, which is dictated in that book, isn't it? There's like the book of the thing, and then there's like an approach based book, isn't there?
Yeah.
And that, that's good to know, isn't it, Emilia? Because as you mentioned, it wasn't like you did just go cold turkey, but it wasn't as if like those thoughts and feelings and everything were gone. They were in fact still there, and it was only then through like, oh man, like you did some deeper work and you're like, oh, there's a lot of things here that have not been uncovered. And going through that was actually what helped you out on the other side. Because I know for myself, I've kind of done, what was it, like 2 major tracking cycles in my life, and then before those it was just different diets or meal plans or whatever, different approaches, and the kind of post tracking life, it was weird. It was like a kind of, I'll open up my fitness pal just to see where I am or whatever. And it was like there was that attachment and that like fear of gaining weight. And inevitably both times I did gain weight. And it's like, and actually it was a big journey to get happier in a bigger frame, because I'm still bigger now than like I'm obviously bigger than my leanest, but like a lot of people get afraid of weight gain. And it's funny actually that like, where my physical and social health and everything is now, I'm actually like bang okay with it. And it's people need to kind of go through it, I think. Yeah,
for sure people often when they remove tracking will gain weight. Like, it's quite common. Sometimes it comes back down, sometimes it doesn't. But there's so much scientific talk of the settling point or the settling range, or where your body is where your body is healthiest and meant to be. And it's like, realistically, your settling range is where you're not preoccupied with food. Like that's what your settling range is. And it might be a bit heavier than you want it to be. It might be a little bit lighter than you thought it was. It doesn't, like, it's worth it. The trade-off of being a little bit heavier, I think, usually is mitigated by the fact that you're not obsessed with food anymore. Because actually, when you're obsessed with food or you're preoccupied with food, your body image is crap anyway, because you're just constantly thinking about it. So sometimes you might be like, oh, I am a bit heavier, but most of the time you tend to be a bit more chill about it, because you're not thinking about it all the time.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I like that whole, because I mean, I've got my own demons with food still, and it's still a journey, and I'm very open about that. Like, I'm not one of those coaches who's afraid to like let down this like facade of perfectionism, because I actually think that the more open and honest you can be about that journey, and how like I clearly have the skills to help it with other people, but I'm still working on them myself, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And as you said, it's going through that journey with clients as well. Emilia, like, I'm conscious of your time, and this has been great. I think it's going to be really valuable for everyone listening to it. But you've mentioned obviously a lot about your own journey. Have you got any like books? You mentioned Brene Brown. Have you got like books and things that you could recommend to people if they want to dig a little bit deeper into this?
Okay, let me think. Anything by Brene Brown is great. Daring Greatly is probably her best one.
Yeah.
For this sort of stuff.
I agree.
Yeah, great. The Untethered Soul is airy-fairy, wishy-washy, no scientific background to it whatsoever, but fantastic. And I would say it's one of my favorite books. It talks a lot about quite meditative and spiritual, and it really emphasizes that you are not your thoughts narrative. And I think for a lot of people, great thing to read. Another thing, that there's this huge relationship between our eating habits and our attachment styles. So there's a book called Attached, which you will think that's got nothing to do with food, but trust me, when you read it, it will really help, because people who have avoidant attachment styles or insecure attachment styles have a higher incidence of binge eating and overeating, and there's lots of reasons for that. So I think that's really interesting. So everyone should read Attached, and just for their general life. I think if you struggle with self-compassion, anything by Kristen Neff is a great book to read. She actually does a workbook, which is great. And I'm sure that there'll be more. I've definitely done a few posts on good books, so I've definitely got some in there. Those ones are all great ones to start with, though. And if you're interested in intuitive eating, of course, like the intuitive eating, Enriched book is great, if that's what you're into. But you might have to research at the site at the beginning.
Yeah. Good caveat. Yeah. Great. Well, thank you, Emilia. This has been great. I'll obviously post links to your social media channels and EIQ and everything into the notes as well. So, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a really enjoyable conversation.
Thank you for having me.